Welcome to Voice It, a podcast showcasing people in the Clare Valley and the mid-north of South Australia who've started their own businesses from scratch and have turned them into success stories. This is a chance for them to tell you their story. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer.
Someone recently said to me that girls get their confidence from their fathers, and my dad always was probably one of my biggest cheerleaders, always told me I could, do anything. And so probably has never occurred to me that things wouldn't go well, but at least also I don't like the idea of leaving any stone unturned, I think. And I do sometimes say to my kids, like, don't worry, if I die tomorrow, don't feel sorry for me. I've given it a really good crack, And I think having Michael by my side as well, he's very supportive in terms of I've had a very free rein.
In this episode, you're going to meet the woman behind the newly built and architecturally designed gin distillery that sits majestically among the vineyards on the outskirts of Clare. The Clare Valley Distillery and Tasting Room formally opened its doors in March 2025. Behind this new addition is lawyer and teacher and Clare Valley local Katherine Nugent. Karks, as most people know her, had this dream for the last 7 years, distilling over the idea with Guy Parkinson, who's the former chef of Seed, and Di Mayfield, who is her beloved aunt and godmother, both who are now her business partners. Karks loves gin. She loves people and wanted to create a space for the Clare Valley community, in particular a space for creative writing retreats, because she's also writing a book. There is so much more to Karks than meets the eye. She is going to take you on a whirlwind trip through her life, from the Adelaide Hills to Denmark to Galway to the Clare Valley, embarking on numerous career pathways along the way, journalism and law and teaching. There is so much in this episode, so put the kettle on or go for a long walk. Either way, this is Katherine's story. Enjoy.
I had the dream childhood. Grew up in a little village, Stirling. It's between Stirling and Crafers. Went to Stirling Kindy, Crafers Primary School. Had a very idyllic childhood, growing up in a big garden in a house on top of the hill. It was next to a school. And I had 3 brothers, fabulous mother and father, very happily married. It was idyllic. And I really wanted to create that same childhood for my children. And the only thing that was missing from my own childhood was a pony. I really, really wanted one, and I used to just bang on about it from my poor parents. Every birthday or Christmas I'd get another 6 riding lessons or whatever they could afford to give me, but I just really wanted the pony.
Well, when did you first get a pony then?
Well, I did when I was 11 years old. They bought me a yearling, and I gisted him at a chunga. And he was just the love of my life. I had him until I was probably 6 in year 12, just after year 12, and I just got too big, too tall for him. But it was just the start of, I still adore horses. And so moving to Clare, part of that was so I could have a horse on my own property. And I delivered my dream childhood to my own children. They had chickens, ponies, sheep, the full works, really. The stone cottage on the hillside, everything I dreamed of as a child they had. And they've all just skipped off to Melbourne, Adelaide. They just couldn't be less interested, to be honest. Pretty devastating.
Let's talk about Clare in just a moment. Going back to the Adelaide Hills, what did your parents do?
Well, my dad was a company director. He was in eyewear, just selling lenses and, spectacle frames, really, out on the road selling those. And my mum, she was trained as a nurse, and I think she was the last nurse ever allowed to be married and still work at the Children's Hospital back in the day. But then once she had her first child, she was only 22 then, she then wasn't allowed to work. This is, back in 1967. She had my brother Ben. Then she was a fabulous cook. So I think the youngest woman had just started senior school. She opened Jolly's Boathouse, the bistro, with Belinda Hannaford, and she went from there into then private catering, and she ended up catering for Queen Elizabeth at Carrick Hill in 1988 or 7 or 8, whatever it was. I remember I was waitressing. I was about 18 or 19 then.
Wow.
So she was a fantastic cook. So it was always just, and went off on this big, she did weddings and all these massive events, and she was crazy to have these 16, 17-hour days doing a wedding at lunchtime and someone else's, party for dinner. And
where did she get her skills of being such a brilliant chef though? Well, because you can just love to cook, but then to go to that level, that's pretty amazing.
I think, she has a really fascinating story, but I think she ended up being the eldest of 9 children. Her father died very young and her mother remarried a few years later to a man who had 5 children, and she was the eldest. So I think she was left alone a lot to look after all those kids and cook. But then she just loved food, loved cooking. She was fabulous at it, very creative, quite a sort of flamboyant, creative type. And she went to Hong Kong in the 80s and did a cooking school over there and came back with things like coriander. No one else had ever even heard of them. And she was throwing these fabulous things together. And anyway, she got quite renowned. And interestingly, I just told this story again recently, she sold her catering company. She had terrible trouble with her varicose veins in the end, just couldn't handle the long days on her feet on the concrete floors. Sold it to Rob Kalenchik. He bought Janet Vincent Catering, and then Rob did that he sort of trained under her for a couple of years. Then he ended up opening Botanic Gardens restaurant, and then after he'd run his own private catering for a while, and then his son James Kalenchik runs Ash Catering here in Clare, in Auburn, I beg your pardon, and married beautiful Sarah. And I was just telling them the other day, because they were here at my distillery. It's come catering.
Full circle,
yeah,
hasn't
and
it?
Just made me so happy. And apparently, I'm hoping that Rob will come up one day and come and see me, that full loop.
Wow, the things that you find out about people.
Yeah, and then my mum ended up, having done finished catering, she ended up being a wound specialist, going back to nursing and becoming a wound specialist. That was her thing.
She sounded like she had a lot of get up and go.
She really did.
Where is she now? Where are your parents now?
My dad is still in Stirling. My mum died a long time ago now, which is terrible. That was a bit of a rug-pulling moment in my life. She died very suddenly and unexpectedly, and that was in 2007. My dad remarried a few years later to one of her closest, dearest friends, which was really lovely. That friend, Margie, had lost her husband. They were one of the inner circle of people that we used to,
hang out with
different houses on the Sundays for the long lunches. He died 5 years to the day before my mum. So Margie was at Henry's grave when she got the call about my mum, and anyway, she was just there because Mum had been there for her when Henry died. She was just there helping all of us. She helped me with my wedding, just everything. And then, of course, naturally, it just was a natural progression that she's now married to my dad. And yeah.
So how old was your mum when she passed away?
62. So she was the youngest, most sort of vibrant, busy of all of my children's grandparents. Like, she was the fittest, everything, and just the least expected. And she was the most involved grandmother, very devoted, and luckily I had my children relatively young. My brothers hadn't even had their children yet, so I was very fortunate that they had some sort of contact with my mum, which is lovely.
What were you like? How would your parents describe you?
I think they would describe me as very bookish. I remember I was just always had my head in a book. I read and read and read, and I used to write, writing and reading. That was my jam. I just loved it. I was but then I'd be, throwing the netball around a bit, playing the playground. But I was really happiest when I just had my nose buried in a book. And I loved school. I loved English. I loved languages. I was probably their academic child, only because I also just enjoyed it and I could see that pleased them. I think that was how they would describe me.
Oh, right. And you obviously
also
loved to ride. Yes.
Horses and books.
You grew up in the Adelaide Hills. Where did you get educated?
I did go to a few different schools, but my main ones were Crayford's Primary School. And then I started school in Sydney, and I started young. For some reason in Sydney, I started at 4 years old, so I ended up finishing school really young. I finished at 16. I was out, would have been starting uni at 16 if I hadn't done an exchange.
Oh, so your parents were originally not from South Australia?
No, they were, but we swapped houses for 2 years. We ended up in Sydney for 2 years. I can't really remember what the details were, but I was over there and started school when I was 4, and came back and went to Scotch College for a short while, and then went back to Crayford's Primary School. I was there for a few years, and then to Seymour College. I was there for the rest of my schooling, and then I ended up in school in Denmark, that was another thing. That was my exchange year. That was fabulous for a year.
And why did you want to do that?
I think because I was 16, and back then you could go straight into law, which I'd been accepted into Adelaide Law School at the 16, which I think Mum and Dad did see that really it's probably just a bit young to be learning, to be studying that sort of content at that level. So I really was keen to travel. I'd never been. I might have been in a plane, but back then kids didn't travel that much. So I was keen to see something different, a different culture. I really wanted to try a different life. I wanted to try speaking a different language. I wanted to try living in a family where I had a sister. I always wanted a sister. I set out this brief that I wanted, somewhere where they had snow would be ideal. I thought living by the sea would be really kind of cool if that was possible. Somewhere with horses, obviously. A sister, a different language. Ended up in Denmark, which back then no one even knew where it was. I had to look it up, like we didn't know anything about Denmark then. I ended up in this beautiful family that I'm still very close to, and I had a sister, Io, who I'm still really close to. I'm seeing her daughter tonight in Adelaide, she's au pairing for my cousin who's in Sydney, but they're here for Easter. My Danish mum and dad, I call them mor and far, which is mum and dad, and I'm very close to them. And I'm going back there just in June for Io's silver wedding, my sister's silver wedding. But anyway, so I ended up on a farm by the sea with 2 horses, 2 brothers and my sister Io, and I'm still in very close contact with them.
Was it a Rotary exchange?
It was an AFS, which I think it stands for American Field Service, but I had to apply through the Mount Lofty chapter, which was my local chapter.
For you at 16, having the courage to go overseas by yourself to a country you'd never heard of, to go and live with a family you've never met, that's a pretty big deal.
And I see in hindsight, I think I can see that. But at the time, I was just very excited. I think I always did quite like to push myself, and see how far I could, stretch myself, I guess. And I always I'm not sure if from an early age I recognised the rewards in doing that, or if I just, I don't know, intuitively knew that was good for me. And I wanted to just, differentiate myself a bit, get out of just being, Katherine Vincent, Janet's daughter, Ben's sister. I was Ben's sister, notoriously Ben's sister, and I still kind of get caught in that moment. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, I just wanted to be me. And I think it was the most refreshing thing to go overseas. I wasn't allowed to talk to my family for 3 months. That was not recommended, not on the phone. I had to just really immerse. It was a really immersive exchange where I was just in this family, learning a new language. I think I was, but I was writing lots of letters, and I was getting lots of letters back then when you'd write aerograms, and it was, it was pretty. And I was having
I remember aerograms.
And I walked into this Danish school where there were boys there, and can you imagine? It was just fabulous. It was just, I just loved
coming from
it.
an all-girls school.
Yeah, it was just, wow, it was just excellent. So I just honestly loved it. I'd catch this bus to school. It'd pick me up at the end of my driveway. I'd walk through this beautiful raspberry patch, just like a vineyard full of raspberries. Can you imagine? It was heaven. Hop on the bus to school, and then the bus had the back half of the bus was smoking and the front half of the bus non-smoking. It was like that back then.
Is that where you got introduced to smoking? Did you become a smoker?
I was definitely smoking. Yeah, I definitely was smoking a bit back then. Not on the bus, not in the mornings, but
on the bus ride home to school. Did you have to learn their language, or did they, most of them, speak English?
I think, definitely they do speak fairly good English. My Danish mother didn't speak much English, and she certainly didn't speak any English to me. So I learned the language, and I still speak it reasonably fluently, which I really enjoy.
You came back, and I presume that's when you embarked on your law degree.
Yeah, nearly. I came back, and by then I'd sort of I'd been exposed to fantastic sort of Danish culture, which is so far ahead of, in my view, of the Australian sort of society. I just like back then, this is in 1986, 1987, they had paid maternity leave. They had these incredible setups where in Denmark, if you wanted to they're all very highly educated because it's free education over there. So a lot of people would end up with double degrees, but no work experience. But they were very smart, well educated. So one person in the office would head off on maternity leave, paid for a year, or between the parents. They would get 12 months. So often they'd take it. One would take 6 months, the other one 6 months, whichever way. And then so they'd be fully paid. Then the government would pay one of these double degree graduates to go in and fill that spot. So they would end up leaving. The person would come back from their maternity leave, whatever. The graduate would leave with 6 or 12 months work experience in a really good job. And they just had these really good sort of schemes, and it was much less gendered than Australian society. It was much less, obviously, sexist and chauvinistic.
Yes.
All that stuff. Especially, I'm talking, what is that, 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah,
it's a long time ago.
the 80s. Yeah.
So that I really noticed that and really appreciated that. So I came back sort of a bit more strident and, forward thinking, and I thought, and I really still wanted to write. So I enrolled in journalism. I did journalism for a year. And then after that year, I went back to Denmark and I ended up falling back in love with my Danish boyfriend. I kind of had that whole muddle, like that wild child time back then. So it really wasn't until I was 22 that I came back and settled down and did my arts law degree.
Oh, wow. So that's a fairly big chunk from 16 to 22.
So I did a year of journalism. I did a year of communications journalism, all that sort of mucking around trying to work out what I was doing while I was trying to fund my trips back and forward from Denmark, really.
How many times did you go back?
A few times. Anyway, I broke up with him and it's hard to maintain. Back then, we didn't have any smartphones or anything. We were doing writing letters and it was all, it's pretty hard work.
Reversing the charges?
Yeah, $120 an hour, the phone. Can you imagine when you're a student? So it was pretty impossible, but it was great.
Journalism wasn't for you?
I think it possibly was. I just got a bit, very highly, principled, idealistic. At the end of our first year, there wasn't a very big class. And they played a couple of really graphic videos to us as the class. And one of them was Bud Dwyer, the US Senator. See, I still remember it. Shooting himself in the face. He called a press conference and then he shot himself in front of the press. That was one. The other one was in Northern Ireland where the police had been just like mauled, but been dragged out and just mauled by these protesters. It was just horrific. And they tried to make us position ourselves as though we were there. You were there. Okay, what are you going to do? What questions are you going to ask? And I just sort of put my hand up and said, I'd be just so horrified. They wanted us to interview Bob Dwyer's wife. I said, there's just no way. I know I couldn't do that. And they said, does anyone else in this class feel like Katherine? And no one put their hand up. And it made me think, oh my gosh, this is just not for me. I've clearly misread this whole, I couldn't do it. I know there's no way. You couldn't pay me enough money. I just was worried about being forced to do things like that, which I was so outside of my comfort zone and what instinctively feels right to me as a human being, and I'm very compassionate. I just don't think I could do it.
That's extreme.
I just went, I exited stage left then on my high horse, I guess, thinking, I can't do that.
So why law?
Because I had a lot of encouragement, a bit of pressure from my parents all along that's what they thought would be the right thing for me. When I was a child, I always wanted to be a teacher. I still clearly remember 8-year-old girl writing stories. I wanted to be a writer or a teacher. That's what I wanted, to teach English or write stories. So that was my thing. And Mum and Dad definitely thought writing stories was no guarantee for a successful life. And they thought, teaching that was fine, but they wanted me to reach my potential, Annabelle. It was all about potential back then, and I'd done well at school and all that stuff. I got into law, which they used to love telling their friends. I just got that. I could hear it. When I was doing journalism, I could still hear my mum and dad say, Karki, she got into law, but she's doing journalism. And I just felt their disapproval a little bit, that I wasn't quite doing the things that had been expected of me. And I think I don't know, maybe after I broke up with my boyfriend, I was feeling a bit, I just needed something to validate me. And I went and thought, I'll just do this. And it was, I got instant reassurance from my family. That was a good thing. Karki's doing law. Isn't this great? And so I did it. And I never thought I'd practice law. I just thought I'll just do it to keep them quiet and happy. Anyway, I fell into it. I started doing with my articles, I was working at Johnson Withers, and I could see that there was this sort of slightly more left field way of making a difference and actually doing some good law that would hopefully impact positively on people. And I think that's all I've ever really wanted to do, was just make a difference and have a positive impact, and for my life to matter somehow, to mean something, to do good things, because that brings me, fulfillment and joy and makes me happy.
How many years did you do law in the end?
Well, I'm still doing a little bit of law.
Are you still doing a little bit now?
Do.
Okay.
Yeah, because I really love Kelly. So I do a bit of law up there for her, which I really enjoy. She's just got this beautiful workplace culture that she's created, and she's such a phenomenal woman in her own right, as well as being a great leader and awesome to work for. So I just did a couple of locum gigs for her, and then I'm like, I really enjoy this. And so I'm trying to do one day a week. I really enjoy going up there. I love their staff. They're all beautiful, great people.
So let's backtrack a bit. Yeah. How did you end up in the Clare Valley then?
It was through Johnston Withers, but I had been up here once before. I think it was in 1993 with Michael, who's my now husband. We went to the Clare races, and I was about, 2 or 3 back then. And William Jacker's wife at the time, Kate Gale, said to me, Karki, you would love it up here in the mid-north. You could have a horse and all this thing. And I think it just stuck in my head. That little nugget, it stayed with me, and I thought it never occurred to me to live this far away. But anyway, and then when I was finished law school, I was working at Johnston Withers, and they had this little office in Clare. They'd come and visit once a week, and there's always a bit of a drama on Thursday. Who's going to Clare? And they'd have to hire the car and someone would drive up and have to bring all the files. It was all this is in the 90s, you know, like hard work, who's going to leave the office for the day. And anyway, when I got pregnant with my second child, and I was thinking, oh, this is a bit awkward. Haven't been here very long and I'm pregnant, and how am I going to manage this? I can't really imagine doing 50-hour weeks with 2 babies. This is hard. And but then I thought, oh, Claire, remember the little nugget about that'll be a nice place for you to live. The office was open 1 day a week, because back then in the law it was really hard to get part-time work. And I thought, well, gosh, you know, Michael can work anywhere. He's a GP, but it's hard as a lawyer to get work that's so like 1 day a week. Perfect. So I approached Brian Withers. I told him, look, I'm pregnant. I'm going to be having a baby at the end of the year, but how about we move to Clare and I'll run the Clare office for you? And he sort of sat back, and he's like stroked his tie, and, you know, Katherine, there's never going to be much of it. It's only ever going to be 3 days a week. You realise that, Claire. It'll never be more than 3 days a week, that practice. And I'm thinking, happy days. I said, no worries, that's fine. Anyway, surely within a year it was like, I needed a second lawyer, or within a couple of years it was.
Wow.
Yeah, we had to move office. They moved office twice, and now they're in May.
You built it up. Well done, you.
I think that just happened. Claire, I feel like Claire just kind of sort of built up.
When did you meet Michael?
When I was 22.
When you were 22, and where did you meet him?
I met him, the physical location was at the Maiden Magpie Hotel.
Love it.
Yeah, but I think it was, almost no, it was a bit of a setup from my little brother, Joseph, who was working with Michael at the time at an independent grocer's. They were stacking shelves in a warehouse. Michael had taken time out from uni, and Joe was in there working, and so Joe would have been 18 or something. And he said, there's this bloke at work with, he's really nice. I think you'd really like him. No, he's really intelligent. I think you'd really like him. And I'm like, yeah, right. You know, he's a guy driving the forklift down it to wherever they were. I wasn't really interested in a relationship. I'd had my big breakup with my Danish boyfriend. And I just thought, I'm just not interested. But anyway, Joe would be saying the same things to Michael. You should meet my sister and la la la. All my brothers had been shockers when any of my boyfriends, they'd just always roll their eyes. I just didn't really think, no, don't really like him. And I was never allowed to kiss my big brother's friends or anything. They were out of bounds. Well, mind you, my brother kissed all of my friends. Anyway, they were quite choosy about who I was allowed to be with. But Joe really liked this guy, Michael Nugent, was very encouraging of the relationship. I remember thinking too, and then of course I met Michael and I thought he was really lovely. And then I thought, this is just going to make Christmas easy. Like, just all the boys like him. Don't have to convince anyone.
Again, it's approval.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. He was fairly quiet back then. So remember my mum, who was very like vivacious and sort of, was like, gosh, Karks, he's very quiet. Just anyway, it took her a couple of years to sort of get to know Mike. She was living in Sydney at the time and coming back and forth. But then she absolutely was one of his biggest fans by the end. Yeah, I mean, we know she definitely, she rated him. Took her a while.
So pretty much it was when you met him, you thought he was lovely. It was kind of instant.
Well, I guess. And he was very shy. He was quiet. He was just sort of, not this. He would stand at the bar and just encourage me to go and talk to my friends. He was happy to standing at the bar by himself drinking his beer. I was like, gosh, this is awkward. Like he would ring me up. He was working, one of his jobs was as a human guinea pig for some whatever drug trial they were doing. So he'd be in hospital getting blood tests and whatever, and he was watching videos as he did back then. I was working at Focus Video in Stirling. He'd ring me up with nothing to say. So I'd be there nervously talking like this is in the, just trying to I'm thinking, well, why are you ringing me? Just he was so quiet. Anyway, it was a bit of hard work to start with.
So then what was it about him that you liked then if you didn't talk much?
I think it's just so many things. He's still such an interesting person. Like I'm still learning new things about him even now. He makes me laugh. Like he's just such a quirky, complex person. And I thought he was pretty hot. I think he'll think.
Obviously, you got together, you started having children.
Yeah.
When did you have your first child?
Matilda was born in 1996.
How old were you then?
27 by the time I had her. Yeah.
Oh, so you had been together for a few years before the kids started turning up.
Mm-hmm.
You had 3 children?
Yes.
There's Matilda, Isabella.
And Patrick.
Mm-hmm. And they're all now in their
20s.
Mid to late 20s?
Yeah. Well, Patrick's 22, so he's the youngest. And Matilda's 28, but she'll be 29 in August.
So they've all just gone and doing their own things now. They're
well and truly. Yeah.
So let's go back to the law side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you and Michael, and you're pregnant with Isabella, moved up here, built up the practice. What did you actually specialise in?
Well, it was general practice, but I did end up having a little niche area, which this led me to where I am now. But I always really enjoyed criminal law, crime, just because it's really that black and white letter of the law, reading the legislation, applying it to the facts, and then telling a story around it. There's a lot of storytelling in the courtroom, which I loved, standing up and telling the story about how this happened. And I really enjoyed that. I do miss that theatre of the courtroom. Then I would do in the country, it's all about, property, wills and estates, trusts, sort of just those types of things. And when people die, state administration. So I did lots of that. But then to answer that question you asked a while ago, I was there for, I think it was 20 years in the end. But for the last sort of few years, I was just getting a bit itchy. I need to do something else. So what can be my thing that I love to do, that I look forward to going to work? And I thought, I'm going to specialise in food and wine law. Why not? I'm in the Clare Valley, and that's going to be my jam. So I joined the International Wine Lawyers Committee, and I was going off to conferences with the wine lawyers, and that was really fun. And that is how I came across Guy Parkinson, who had moved to Clare in 2014 and opened that fabulous Seed wine house and kitchen with a beautiful gin bar and restaurant, incredible food. And he had this fabulous gin bar with 81 gins from all around the world and Australia. And he said, there's no local gin, Karki. No one's doing one. We should do one.
Ah, so that's how it happened.
Mm-hmm. So we ultimately ended up making the house gin for Seed. So it was Seed gin. And we initially were Seed Distillery. We were going to be an adjunct of Seed winehouse and kitchen. We were hoping to set up in the chaff mill, but it just all kind of went a bit sideways because that got leased out to Umbria. We sort of lost the run of the place, and Guy then moved down the main street, and it all kind of went sideways from there. But luckily, in the hindsight, perfect, because look where we are now.
I know, and we're going to talk about where we are now a bit later.
Sure.
Let's backtrack again,
sure.
Because this is what happens in conversations. We go all over the place, and then we end up back at the right destination at the end.
Sure.
When you were doing law, you also did your diploma in teaching.
Yes.
So you wanted to fulfil a little bit of a lifelong dream.
Yeah,
there.
I think what happened there, I was on the board St Joseph's School with Peter Shearer, and there were a few of us, and the school back then went to year 7. That was it. And I was sort of looking down the barrel of my eldest child, who was probably only in about year 2, 3, 4 back then, going off to high school, boarding school. I wasn't really sure. I assumed we'd move back to Adelaide maybe rather than send our children to boarding school. I wasn't sure what we were going to do, but I was pitching really hard for a middle school at St Joe's. I thought, look, why wouldn't we? We could, and back then I was thinking we'd have it down at Seven Hill, and we could introduce, viticulture as part of the curriculum. Had all these great ideas, and I was on that school board for 10 years, really pushing for that middle school. But halfway through, one of the things they came back at us on the board were the Catholic Ed was saying, well, where are you going to get your specialist teachers from? You can't primary school teachers can't teach middle school. And I was thinking, I'll bloody go and get my teaching. I'll do it, Don't let that stop us. So then I went and I was on some hike. I thought, light bulb, I can teach. Great excuse for me to do my teaching. And also because I'd been in the law for 10 years by then, nearly. And I was just fed up with putting my kids in OSH for the school holidays. I was working all through those times where I should have been at home with my children, and I still regret that a bit.
Do you?
A little bit, yeah, because what happened, I thought, right, I'll do my teaching to qualify, and then I will cross the floor and become a teacher. Then I can be at school with my kids. I'll have the school holidays with my kids. It's all going to work out. So I did that. In 2007, I'd finished my first teaching prac at Clare High School in 2006, which I loved, and met Sue Morley, who I'm having coffee with later today. But in 2007, we were in Ireland. I set up this thing where we would do a term of school in Galway on the west coast of Ireland, so I could teach. I applied for a job with Bartley Fannin, the principal of St Mary's College in Galway City. This was set up by a mutual friend of ours. He's a doctor. He said, "Oh yeah, Karki, go and see Bartley. He's a good man. He'll see if he can get a job." I sat with Bartley for half an hour, and he says, "Oh yeah, well, what do you want to teach then?" And I said, well, I've done my English, which is what I really want to teach, but I need to teach history as well. And he goes, oh, sure, you can teach Irish history then. And I was thinking, oh, my God.
So hang on. So why did you go to Ireland?
Well, we'd lived there. So when Matilda was a baby, we went over and lived in sort of Ireland, UK for 15, 18 months while Michael did, he did sort of like his first year out as a medical officer. He did in the UK. He's born in London, so he's got a ticket to work over there. And so we ultimately wanted to be in Ireland. After a few months, we ended up in London and, roundabout. But I still had this sort of little bit of an itch that I wanted to live in Galway. I just love Galway city. So we went back there. The kids are like Patrick started school in Galway. The girls went to school and I was teaching at St Mary's College and I absolutely loved it. And
you just took a break from
Yeah, so
law.
I took my 10 years long service leave. So long service and I went over and my mum was like just panicking. She gave me this book. I remember this book, the concise, book on Irish history. Like it's like, what is it, 50,000 years Irish history? She was really worried about me trying to teach something that I knew nothing about. Anyway, off I went. The family and Michael and Brian O'Flynn, they swapped jobs. So we swapped houses, jobs, everything. The two boys, the GPs, swapped. They were existing friends of ours, and Brian's kids all went to St Joe's. Our kids went to his kids' school. Everyone just lent us uniforms. It was just fantastic. The whole setup. I loved teaching. I had a great time being the English and history teacher at St Mary's College.
And how did you find it? Did you just pick it up quite easily?
I think so. I mean, I've always been like nannying, looking after people's kids. I love kids. I just really enjoy their company. I had a couple of great teachers when I was, going through school, and I wanted to be one of those teachers that could bring good energy to the classroom, that wanted to be, that you could tell the kids know when the teacher wants to be there, and I knew that was going to be, I wanted that to be me because I did want to be there, and I thought I want to teach them some fun stuff and make learning fun and all that, which of course they had a great time with me because I couldn't pronounce half their names and it was really fun. That was all going really well, and I was handing in my assignments and I was getting like, high distinctions. I just loved it. And I remember speaking to my mum and saying, it was great. I asked you to go to Denmark for Christmas, have Christmas with my Danish family, come home in early January with the kids and put them back all into St Joe's. And Patrick was going to be starting school. They'd all have a year together or 2 years together at St Joe's before Matilda was, what was going to happen with her at the end of year 7. And I thought, well, that's it. I can come back in January. I don't have to go back to Johnson Withers because I'm a fully qualified teacher now. It's January. I can just exit stage left and start teaching. How fun. Whichever school, but I'd be there, in the same timeline as my kids in terms of when the holidays were. Yeah. All of that. Just a major lifestyle. Work-life balance, all of that. I was just, yay. And then it was the stuff, Christmas dinner, which student teachers normally went to, but I was obviously in my 30s then. I was, mid-30s. Bartley rang me and says, Katherine, dinner with the dogs, you're going to come along? And so I went to this staff Christmas dinner, which was great. I finally got to have a pint with Pat. Anyway, all these lovely teachers, and I had a great old time. It was a rainy, drizzly Galway night. This is in December, and I was heading back from the dinner in a cab to meet Michael and our friend Anthony in a little snug in the lock-in in the pub across the road from where we lived. And anyway, it's a drizzly night, and I'd noticed I had back then the flip phone Motorola's. Noticed a missed call from my dad, which is really weird. Like, he'd never called, So I thought, oh. And it was a voicemail, darling, please ring me urgently. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, one of my brothers has been done for drink driving, or there'll be some urgent legal thing I have to help with back home. And I'm thinking, oh, should I ring now or I'll wait till I get there? And I thought I'll just get out of the cab. And anyway, Michael and Anthony hadn't arrived yet. So I was standing in the drizzly rain. I thought I'll just quickly ring Dad. And as I rang, and he just started yelling down the phone at me, darling, Mum's dead, she's gone. He's just yelling, like, it's terrible. And I'm like, what? What? It's just the last thing I expected. Like, suddenly I'm just like, oh my gosh, I've got to, and this is like 2:00 in the morning. And I've just sort of got a obviously massive regroup. So I obviously didn't end up going to Denmark for Christmas, and I didn't have the New Year's with our Irish friends or any of that stuff. I was coming home and had to give my mother's eulogy. So that just was the biggest shift for me. And then I just thought, I can't change career at this time in my life. I just have to stay in my comfort zone of the law. So I stayed there. And then it was just too late. By the time I could sort of possibly think of it, I couldn't afford to because we were paying private school fees. Anyway, so I stayed for another 10 years while the kids all went through boarding school, and then it was still a fulfilling career. But I just never got to really teach. But the year after Mum died, I went down to, Sophie Goss actually invited me to this show brunch. The guest speaker was John Shepherd from Operation Flinders. I'd never heard of Operation Flinders before, but gave the spiel, and he'd interviewed a couple of young people who'd been out on the program.
So for those people that don't know what Operation Flinders is, Can you explain that a little bit further?
Sure. So Operation Flinders is a program, wilderness therapy, adventure outback for young people who are just either struggling to find their way in life or just need a shift in focus, perspective, some time away from their screens, I guess now it is. But back then it was just a new direction, taking them out of their comfort zone, their immediate family and friends, and throwing them up into the austere, ancient, beautiful, rugged landscape of the Northern Flinders Ranges. And they do walk, they carry all their gear for 8 days, they're sleeping pretty rough, they're making all their own meals, they're in a team of 10 young people and 4 adults supporting them through, but it's all about sort of survival and out there and team building and really basic stuff. So
you embarked on this
I just thought,
new adventure.
I thought I'm a newly qualified teacher. This is so September, so I would have got my certificate in May that year, for the following year. So I would have had it for a few months, but I'm sort of not sure how I'm going to use that now. And youth justice, I did a lot of youth court work, which I really enjoyed, and hiking, which I love. So I've always been a hiker, and I thought, hiking, youth justice, teaching, this has just the light bulb went off in my head. Now I know why I came down here this morning. And straight after the breakfast, I went up to John Shepherd and said, oh my gosh, how do I join? I just really want to do this. I'm a teacher, I'm a lawyer, I would love hiking, I love working with young people. And so he just pointed me to the website, and I just applied straight away, and I jumped through the hoops, whatever, to become qualified. And I went off the following year, in 2009, on my first Operation Flinders walk with young people, and I absolutely loved it. And I remember, so firstly that breakfast day, I remember going to I couldn't wait to get out of there, to sit in the car park to ring Michael, who was in Wilcannia or somewhere at the time, say, I remember, I think I was almost in tears to say, I can't believe what I've just found this thing I'm going to do. I just can't wait to do it. And I was telling him, babbling all about it, saying it just sounds so up my alley. I just really had that sense of purpose again, I think. And this is having lost, and it just made me feel like, this is great. I've got something to hang on to here I can do. And it'll work, it'll fit into our lives. I need to do this once a year, go away for 2 weeks away from my family and do this amazing thing.
So Operation Flinders filled that void for you essentially because you didn't go into full-time teaching. But you have been relief teaching from time to time.
Yes.
Haven't you?
Mm-hmm. So when I did my 20 years, took my 20 years long service leave from JW, and I resigned then as well. I thought I'm out. Pretty much got Patrick through school. I had the opportunity and I thought I need to do this. And we went to Russia for 3 weeks, which ended up being one of the best feel-good stories of my life. I ended up writing it. It's called Jersey Gate. It's another story for another day. But one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of just crazy.
Just a great trip.
A great story. Just trying to negotiate time off and everything back then was just such hard work. I thought, right, I'm out. I'm going to do something else. I might try to. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I wanted to write, and I did creative writing courses. I started writing a book, which I'm, haven't finished yet.
I was going to ask if you've written the book because I'm thinking everything's sort of leading to a book.
Yeah,
surely.
I know.
So have you started writing?
I wanted to have creative writing retreats here in this beautiful space.
Yes.
I have started writing. I've done about at least 80,000 words of a novel, a historical fiction novel, which this thing was probably a bit too big a thing to bite off as my first novel because there's just so much research involved. It's so time consuming, but I wish I'd written something a bit more contemporary and easy. I could just fly through it. Anyway, it's hard, isn't it?
But you go with what you feel is right at the time.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? So anyway, as soon as I can, I want to keep going. I want to finish it just so I can say I've finished it, even if nothing ever happens to it. Then COVID just threw me a bit, so I thought, better keep a leg in each camp here. So I renewed my practicing certificate, renewed my teaching. I thought I'll just see where this goes. I started relief teaching at the high school, really enjoyed that. And I did that until the end of last year, really. And then St Joe's opened their middle school, finally. And I do remember the first day when I went in there and I was like, just trying to say to these young, year 8s, whatever, I said, you guys, you've got no idea. This is like a dream of mine from like 15 years ago. It's so exciting. You probably weren't even born then. And here I am teaching you. This vision I had from all that time ago. It means a lot to me to finally be standing here teaching.
We've talked law, we've talked teaching, Operation Flinders. There's a wedding thrown in there as well because, you had the kids first, then you decided to get married.
Part of that is because I never imagined getting married to someone who didn't really want to marry me. What? My parents had a very happy marriage. I just assumed that would be me one day, happily married, and that someone would really want to marry me. But Michael just wasn't into marriage. It wasn't a thing for him. It was much more about having kids, having the family and all of that. So that's, and I thought, okay. And I just thought this just so not romantic. He did, a couple of times he said, is it, he would have done it if that was important to me, if I really wanted it. And I said, well, I just don't want to marry someone who doesn't really want to marry me. And I think it was really the 4 weddings and a funeral. When Mum died, none of us were married. And then within a year, everyone, we all just I think had that suddenly realisation that, oh my gosh, we can't just assume that we'll do this one day. And it was like, wow, one day's now. We have to get on with it. And I guess Michael hadn't had a 40th because I was over in Denmark, Ireland, setting up the Galway gig for the following year around the time when we should have been planning his 40th. So he missed his party. And then I thought, well, I don't want to be the one to suddenly having a party for my 40th. So I thought quickly before I turn 40, we'll get married and have a big fat party and that'll be it. So we did that.
Let's talk about the now, if we can. And let's just say there's been plenty of other things that you have done in your life. We just haven't got the time to go through everything.
Sure.
So you're very, very much an accomplished woman. That's all I can say. Let's talk about the now. And we are sitting in the most beautifully exquisite development. It's a distillery. Would you say it's the first one for the Clare Valley? Or there is a gin distillery, but not of this magnitude in the valley?
Well, it wasn't. This is the first one that's been purpose-built to be a distillery, commercial distillery and tasting room.
Why did you do this?
Because I feel like it was just part of that dream back in Guy and I and Di Mayfield, our business partner, had talked about doing this for so long, and we just couldn't really find, it didn't work out for us at the Chaff Mill, when the bank that Sam McDonald bought, and there wasn't room for a still in there, and we're just trying to find out where can we put this still to make gin and make more gin. We just wanted to make different types of gin, and ultimately I don't know, we sort of got a bit fanciful and we thought we could have a property and grow all our own botanicals on it. And at one stage I think Guy had, pigs in the back, some sort of stable at the back, and he was feeding them all the stuff out of the still. I don't know. It got quite, we had lots of fun and lots of weekends, meetings and working out what to do with this. We formed our company back in 2017, so we've been working on this for a very long time.
That's Seed Gin?
Was Seed. It was called Seed Distillery.
Seed Distillery.
And we bought little Tinny, the little gin van.
Yes.
So we've been popping up at markets, selling our wares through that while just biding our time, waiting for something to pop up. Kept looking, and then Fergus Mann came across him in my Johnson Withers days. I helped him with his brother's estate.
Who's Fergus Mann?
He used to own this property.
Oh, right.
And he lived here for 60 years with his wife, Viv, and their 3 girls. I remember thinking, oh, wow, that when he told me where he lived, I thought, that's such a beautiful place. So I noticed when this came on the market, I wasn't working at Johnson Withers anymore. I didn't realise he'd passed away, and then I thought, oh, that's really sad. And then I thought, oh, but that's that beautiful property, and we should have a look at this. I mean, it was still, he was an old school bus driver. He had all these fingers in lots of pies, so it's like all these sheds and this sprawling chook yard and garden. There's a fernery, and the house was sort of built on about 3 or 4 times. You could tell they'd been there for 60 years, so it had evolved as their family evolved, and it wasn't obviously a commercial operation at all. It was a domestic space. And anyway, I just thought it's just such a great spot. It's it's the Riesling Trail. It's on the main road to the Flinders Ranges. It's near the caravan park. It's near Clare. It's just beautiful. Perfect. It's got the Hutt River running through it. Yeah, we had architect Hank Klaas, who has his own distillery down at McLaren Vale. He designed the building for us. He'd just been recently working with GT Builders. They'd built Dandelion Winery, some magnificent building down there. They all won lots of awards. And they all came up and built this for us. They started in about November 23 and, sort of finished around the end of last year. But then, of course, the landscaping, all the bits and pieces. And it was like the interminable pregnancy. It was supposed to open, I think, will be finished in July. But like all building projects, it's never finished when it's meant to be. And but finally we're here, and it's so lovely to be open now, and it's a really beautiful space. It's got a beautiful vibe, hasn't it? Beautiful energy.
It's wonderful to have something like this in the valley, and it feels high end, and you've got a great product. But the thing I really want to know is, this is the first time you are running a business like this.
That's exactly
right.
This
is new for you.
So new. It's so new.
A lot of sleepless nights?
Yeah, I just can't believe. Well, I had no idea how much work's involved, Annabelle. I feel like I'm just constantly always working, but it's a joyous work. Like I never quite get to where I want to get to in any given day. I've got always so much more to do, and I'm always chasing my tail and trying to deliver to people who are waiting for me on certain things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? How am I going to finish this? Especially when I've got people just calling in all the time. Even when I'm closed, I've got always people coming to the door and wanting to come in, which is so lovely to finally be able to let the people in. And it's such a contrast to to the law and to teaching. You can imagine the law is quite an intense, serious and often anxious energy around it. At school, half the kids don't want to be there, let's face it, sometimes. And so you've got that sort of bit of a divided energy often in the classroom where you're trying to manage it. And but here, everyone comes in, they're happy, they're so happy to be here. It's a beautiful space, so they usually leave even happier than when they arrived.
So what was the end game to have this particular distillery? Where do you want to see it in 5 years' time?
I guess a few things. I mean, when we planning it, there was definitely no distillery. There's nothing at all in the Clare Valley, no offering at all in the gin space. I mean, because it took us so long to get to this point, there has since been Sawmill Gin, who set up at Seven Hill, and also the Three Little Birds down in Auburn, which is great. So now there's a bit of we've got a few through the valley, a sprinkling. But we saw there's a massive need for something other than wineries, for the tourism market here in the Clare Valley. And also just really love gin. I thought, what a fun project. I love cooking. I'm quite creative. I thought that'll just be a really fun thing to do. And then... of course, we've got Guy on board who's, food. I thought I just couldn't see everything about it was just great. And I thought have a beautiful garden with all the botanicals and just have this beautiful creative space, fun place for events. I really want to have creative writing retreats here, like author retreats, because we're right on not just the Riesling Trail, but the Wine and Wilderness Trail, which has been this other long-term passion project for particularly Michael, but also myself and Tim and Bianca Grigg and others in the valley. I just want Clare to be this really fabulous place, a fabulous community, which it is. And I want this to be a community project, a place for, connection. It's for all of us.
What has been probably the biggest challenge in starting this new venture?
Well, in terms of the risk assessment as well, I should acknowledge that Di and Brent Mayfield, so Brent unfortunately is no longer with us, but my uncle Brent and Di, my auntie and godmother, they did so much of this risk assessment and looking at it all. And like Di owns the real estate here. She's bought the property. And also Guy Parkinson, who's very experienced. There are three of us, Guy, Di and myself, very experienced in the hospitality space. So he was constantly waving the flags in front of us saying risks are here and here and here. Guys, we're just saying, I'm just pointing this out. And we're like, okay. But I think finding the property was a huge challenge. And then, of course, getting council, all the compliance is massive, trying to keep everything above board and that you can still keep going forward while ticking big boxes along the way. That was hard work. We couldn't, I tried to get grants. I was trying so hard to get help, and it was really, we pretty much just had to slog it out.
Well done.
So there's so many things, but there's a couple for you.
Well, Karks, I am in awe of you. I think you have done so many wonderful things, and
thanks,
congratulations.
Annabelle.
Oh, seriously. I'm rambling now, but thank you so much for speaking to me today and taking the time out of your busy schedule, because you are super busy. You've got so many balls in the air you're juggling, and I know that's what you thrive on, but it's just an absolute privilege to hear your story and what you've done. Half of it I didn't even know. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Annabelle. It's been such a pleasure. I'm really delighted to be invited on your podcast. I feel very honoured. I really do. I feel like the privilege is all mine. Thank you.
I spent a few hours speaking to Karks because this woman has done so much. When she sets her mind to something, she has no fear and just gets it done. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let me know by reviewing or rating this episode. All links relating to the Clare Valley Distillery and Operation Flinders are in my show notes. Karks is also involved in the Cade McDonald Foundation, which is providing pathways for mental health and well-being. We didn't even get to speak about this in the recording, but you can find out all about the good work they do by clicking on the link in my show notes. Another episode is coming your way, so hit the follow button to keep up to date. Coming up, you're going to meet a farmer who's also a makeup artist. Now that's a combination you don't hear about very often. I can't wait to bring you this story. Just before I sign off, a little bit about me and my business, Voice It. It's a communications business specialising in public speaking training, media training, podcasting, audio memoir production and MC work. I'm passionate about giving people the skills to be effective, engaging and memorable communicators, not just on stage, but in life, in general conversation. I'm a former ABC broadcast journalist and also have 12 years experience in AMUB speech and drama. I use those skills to bring you engaging and fun workshops and recording sessions to make you feel at ease and enjoy the process, because I get it. Public speaking can be daunting, but it doesn't have to be. That's enough about me. I'm Annabelle Homer. I'll catch you very soon for another episode of the Voice It podcast.